Hi, everybody. This is Ebere Okoye, the Wealth Building CPA. Today, we're going to be looking at the State of the Union with our small businesses, with real estate, and the different decisions that we need to be thinking of going forward. Today, we have with us Sherman Ragland, who is the Dean of the Real Investors Academy, where it all started for me, and most of you are also already members of Real Investors. This meeting is strictly for those that are in the wealth building program. Even though we send the link later on to everybody else, I kind of wanted this to be more of an intimate session with you guys, deal with your issues specifically, hear what others are going through, and then address it. So the way I'm going to handle it, Sherman, is I will pull up some items and then we talk about it. And then as people have questions, we'll deal with it. Usually we, just spend usually about an hour on these calls. So I will go ahead and share my screen. And then, Sherman, you want to say hi to the people? Sherman, you want to say hi?
Oh, hi. Pleasure to be here.
All right, so sharing my screen now. Today we're looking at the State of the Union, small business, and starting the recovery process. I guess before we even get into the recovery, do you guys think that we are even at the point of looking at recovery? Or is it that we're kind of like holding our breath a little bit and just for a little bit and we're going to go under? Sherman, what do you think? And everybody else, you can also send a chat and let me know. Do you think we should start looking at the recovery process or that we're still in the thick of it?
I think recovery is the wrong word.
Can I exit?
We are not even close to being in anybody's recovery. A recovery assumes you're going back to what you came from. And we are not going back to what we came from. So I think a more appropriate term would be transition. What phase of transition are we in, not what phase of recovery are we in? Until such time there is a proven cure and probably a version 2.0 vaccine, the fact of the matter is the coronavirus is out there, the coronavirus is real, and the coronavirus is deadly, irrespective of your age or pre-existing medical conditions. The one thing that I agree with a lot of people who are on Facebook and other social media, but I agree with it, but that doesn't mean I go in the same direction they do. But the one thing I do agree on is that China lied. China lied about the number of cases in China. There's no way there was 80,000 coronavirus cases in China. United States is well over what, a million plus, 2 million. So there's no way in a country of our size versus a country of their size that they had 80,000 cases and we have 1 million plus. There's just no way. China lied in terms of saying initially that only the oldest, the most feeble, the ones with pre-existing conditions were the ones who were dying from it. So either we got a different version of the coronavirus or the simple facts of the matter are we were not told the truth. So all the data that we really have about the coronavirus is not pre-coming to America. All the data we have is post coming to America, which depending upon whose account, it's either the middle to end of February or the middle to end of March. So based on the data that we have that we've only been collecting for a couple of months now, it's safe to say that based on what's happening in the United States of America, coronavirus is deadly. Coronavirus does not discriminate based on age, sex, ethnicity. And while it's maybe true that it seems to be raging more in the African-American community, I think that has more to do with occupations and being on frontline occupations, not necessarily first responders, but being in direct contact with the public and having service jobs. And so the simple fact of the matter is until we have a cure, which is probably 2 to 3 years away, and we have a vaccine that's at least on version 2.0. I mean, anybody here want to rush out to be the first ones to get the vaccine? So you got to have at least 6 months to 12 months of the first version of the vaccine that everybody sees, okay, exactly how that happened. So whatever they say is going to be the vaccine, add another 6 months to that. And I think for the most part, we will not return to anything that looks like what our world looked like in the United States of America pre March 16th, let's say, or at least in Maryland. March 16th is sort of like when everything hit the fan in Maryland. New York and Northern California were different stories. They were a month ahead of all of us. And of course, the rest of the country is sort of experiencing their own fallout right now. But, you know, if you know there's a saber-toothed tiger outside your house, and it doesn't discriminate versus your family, your neighbors, and this saber-toothed tiger is invisible, and this saber-toothed tiger has struck, are you going to rush outside your house to go back to normal, knowing the invisible saber-toothed tiger is walking the streets? Probably not. So what we really should be talking about is transition. How do you transition whatever you do as an employee, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, to face the new reality, even though that new reality is less certain than what you came from? But I think I can say with great certainty, we're not going back. Can't.
There, it's Wes. Can I ask a question to Sherman to follow up?
Sure.
Sherman, it's Wes Martin. And there were two things I wanted to touch on. One is a comment and one is a question.
Mhm.
And the first one is with regards to China. I am asking, did we expect any better from them?
Exactly.
In other words, even here in the United States, they're not telling us the truth if it puts things in a bad light. So why is it that we expect that China was going to be upfront if telling the truth was going to put them in a bad light? That was my first.
Is that the comment or the question?
And the secondly, let me.
Okay, that was the comment. Okay.
You answer. And my second point was, you're talking about a transition. I'm asking about the election effect. Could they jimmy things in such a way that it looks better between now and November, and then the real situation becomes evident after November? So my question is, isn't it in the interest of those who are quote unquote in power to kind of keep things and make it look better than it actually is, and then we don't really see the real situation until after the election? I'm going to go on mute and let you answer.
Okay.
Well, let me, Sherman, let me come in because I wanted to talk about the China piece. And this is an open, honest conversation amongst all of us where real estate family and stuff. I'll give you my perspective from an international sense, because I like what Sherman said, that we're not necessarily talking about a recovery process. We're talking about a transition. And so if we wanted to pivot that, transition in terms of how we think, transition in terms of how we make decisions, and then transition in terms of like what Wes is saying, where do we get our information from? For me, one of the things I'll say I'm highly disappointed in, it doesn't have anything to do with who's in power, who's not in power. I'm just highly disappointed in the way America handled this. Because I'm privileged, I mean, I was born here, but I grew up in Nigeria. So I have the benefit of having had what we call a third world experience, and also having had a first world American experience. And I was expecting that America would have been able to handle this better. We all know that the Chinese New Year was happening end of January. That's not something that we needed China to tell us. We knew. We started hearing about the coronavirus at the end of December. And the way that I looked at it was, if little tiny Ebere in little tiny Beltsville, Maryland, little tiny, no political anything, knew that if we don't do what we need to do before the Chinese New Year was over, it was going to be a complete disaster. And I'm not just the only one that had that idea. It started being, so I don't know whether we have this here in America, but in Nigeria, there's a specific place that you're from. So here, let's say if you're from, even if you were born in New York, if your family is from Maryland, you are from Maryland. And then in Maryland, you're from Beltsville. And then if in Beltsville, that's where your great-grandfather from, your ancestors, your siblings, everybody returns there at least once a year to get together. And then now that we're here, we call ourselves, you know, the Africans that are in the diaspora. We also have group meetings. Everybody gets together based on where you're from to connect. And these different groups were having these discussions and bringing up the fact that sooner or later, once, I know we started talking about it January 15th, that if we don't start shutting down, you know, at that time, you know, shutting down Nigeria, shutting down the different countries, before the Chinese New Year happened, it was going to be a disaster. So fast forward now, this is what, almost 4.5 months later. I'm kind of impressed with myself that I was able to make a call and that we really did not have those in power who had more intelligence, more authority, more, you know-how to make that call. And so for me, in terms of pivoting and understanding the transitioning, I realize now that where you get your data from is so important. Even when we're talking about cares and all that, and I know this is not the point of it, I just wanted to pivot, like what lessons am I learning to apply in business? I know that now that I need to do my own due diligence, and I'm almost like transitioning to, I'm in America, but I kind of have to put on the Nigerian hat that I had for 14 years while I lived there. And every time that I go to visit, that's the kind of hat that I need to put on. You kind of have to watch out for yourself. You kind of have to understand that there are certain things that you cannot do. And maybe because I'm used to that kind of lifestyle, it's easy to pivot and adjust and not expect anything for anybody. So I just wanted to throw in that international perspective, because I knew January 15th that once the Chinese New Year was over, a lot of people were going to be disseminated. That's why you see the high rate of what happened in Italy and in New York, because a lot of people that are from that area live in the cities. It was clear as day. So for me, my lesson is I need to trust my judgment a little bit and not just what anybody is telling me on TV. I need to be able to do my own due diligence. And like Wes said, as I'm making decisions, I'm not relying on anybody telling me they're opening up, locking down, stay home, don't stay home, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. There's that you kind of need to make your own plans with sound financial principles when it comes to your business. Go ahead, Sherman.
So very good insight. Corollary to that is my family traces its lineage in America to the roughly early 1800s. The first evidence of Raglands was there was a gentleman from Wales who, for all historical intent and purposes, got thrown out of Wales because he was the black sheep of the family. And he thought he would come to America and try his hand as a slave owner and property owner in Virginia. And by all accounts, he was an abysmal failure and wound up releasing his slaves before they killed him around 1820 something. And they left what was Virginia and went as far north across the river to freedom, and wound up in Ohio and settled in Ohio, a little place called South Point, Ohio, across from Huntington, West Virginia. And there's actually a memorial commemorative plaque in that community of the crossing of the free men and women who ventured from, again, that part of West Virginia pre-Civil War was Virginia, and they basically ventured through Virginia over to Ohio to freedom. And having grown up with so that historical experience, I have come to the conclusion of a couple things. Number one, the United States as a country is highly schizophrenic. It says one thing, but then does another. But then again, I don't know of any other country that doesn't do something similar. And again, not having grown up outside the United States, I don't know what else to compare it to. But when a young Army captain returns from Vietnam after fighting for his country and buys a house in Wheaton, Maryland in 1968, and the very first thing that he decides to do is go take his son for a haircut in Wheaton, Maryland, 1968, walks into the barbershop, and the first thing the barber says to him is, "Hey boy, we don't cut no nigger's hair here. Get the hell out of here." That's a hell of a slap in the face to somebody who just came home fighting for their country. That's not and by all means, please do not take that as a political statement or take that as a pejorative statement. take that from where I come from, which is that's a factual statement. I am a Christian, and as a Christian, I do not believe that this is my home. My home is someplace else. And therefore, to a large degree, I'm more of an observer of what happens in this country now. I have a flag flying outside my house. I was born on the 4th of July. You won't find anybody more patriotic than Sherman Ragland. Having said that, I oftentimes scratch my head at the things that the United States of America says, or more accurately, the citizens of the United States of America say versus what the citizens do. It's just, we are people and people are strange. And I'll leave it at that. Now, back to Wes's comment, I believe that governments lie. I believe all governments lie. And depending upon the nature of how one's government comes together, it either tends to lie more and get away with it longer, or lies a little bit less, but nonetheless, all governments lie. So as an example, I'm a recovering government contractor, entrepreneur, real estate investor. My father literally retired from the Army on a Friday, went to work for the federal government on a Monday, and did a 22-year stint as a senior official in the federal government. My wife is a federal government contractor. We have many friends who are either government contractors or work for the federal government. And I can tell you for a fact, without naming names, in February of this year, the federal government knew exactly how bad this thing was going to get. They had the data, they had the research, they were preparing, and we had a president of the United States who was running around having rallies telling everybody it's not a big deal, only 2 people are going to get it, just keep on doing what you're doing. Despite the fact that the career professionals in the federal government knew exactly what I'm saying to you right now, which is that China is lying. This thing is much worse than everybody's saying. We need to be prepared. And again, without divulging any names, we had many friends call us up and say, you guys need to get ready because the government is lying. The public statements the government was making were in direct opposition to what the facts were on the ground that the government knew. I'm not being political. I'm not trying to be political. This is in no means me telling you who to vote for or not vote for in the upcoming July elections or the November elections. I'm just simply saying people lie and governments are made up of people, and therefore governments lie. And we have to be smarter than our government. And quite frankly, we have to be smarter than our friends on Facebook. And while it's all fun and games to engage in a robust dialogue, and every once in a while you got to unfriend somebody or hoop hoop hooray for other people, we have to be smarter than the dialect and the conversation taking on around us, because the vast majority of people, and I'll never forget this, both my parents are very highly educated. And one of the things that impressed me when I was growing up as a kid was how many books we had in our house. As you can see, this is my man cave. My man cave is basically a library. And there was one particular book that was on the shelf that always intrigued me when I was a little kid that my parents had. And the title of that book is A Nation of Sheep. We are a nation of sheep. People do what they're told to do, oftentimes without even thinking about it. You cannot afford to be the sheep. You need to be the shepherd. And if you can't be the shepherd, be the under shepherd. And you have to take control of your life. And entrepreneurship, in my opinion, is nothing more than a manifestation of taking control of your life by also taking care of how you receive your income. And you can't get so caught up in what happens around you that you forget to take care of what you need to take care of. Now, having said all that, China lied. I acknowledge it. I say it. Now, what do I do about it? Nothing. Because quite frankly, getting too engaged in a conversation about did they lie, why did they lie, when did they lie, how much did they, who cares? Who cares? I just simply throw that out as a statement to say everything we thought we knew about the coronavirus before it came to America was a lie. What happened in Italy happened in Italy. What happened in Sweden happened in Sweden. We have to look at the way that the coronavirus is evolving in America. And the simple fact of the matter is, the only reason I believe why it's not as bad as it could be is because pretty much every state and local government reluctantly shut down. We weren't ready. We weren't even close to being ready. And guess what? We're still not ready. And so as people begin to get back out in the street and try to go back to normal, don't be surprised if you see the number of cases spike. And what will happen is the governments will not intervene next time. The governments have learned their lesson. There's a price to pay for telling people to stay home as the government. However, when the cases spike again, which they will, human beings will tell themselves to stay home. And that has all kinds of repercussions for businesses when all of a sudden people realize, oh my God, it's not quite as safe to go to the restaurants as I thought it was. It's not just like, I mean, we've all probably seen the pictures either on Facebook or social media or however we get our news. Everybody see the pictures from Memorial Day weekend of everybody going to the beach. Explain to me what the social distancing was there. Now,
that really, like, to be honest with you guys, that really, okay, I forgot this is being recorded, so let me say it the right way. I was very upset about the whole situation. I've tried to be politically correct because I don't know who's going to get this. And I felt, so you mean to tell me that you shut down my business, had me on lockdown, had me apply for a loan that I may have to pay back because you're trying to protect people who may not want to protect themselves.
Hello?
And I'm doing all the right things. It really did a number on me. I'm like, why am I having to pay for other people's consequences and failure to take individual responsibility? But like Sherman said, it's happened. You learn from it. What are our transition plans?
Yeah, I mean, like, let me just ask a quick question. Anybody here got a younger brother or sister? Just out of curiosity, a younger brother or a younger sister? Anybody here been a younger brother or a younger sister? Okay, so here's the deal. The United States of America as a country is your kid brother or your kid sister. Hey, get out of my face. You're not the boss of me. Don't tell me what to do. You can tell people for so long, shelter in place, do this, but sooner or later they're going to rebel against it because it is the nature of Americans to do that, right? Even when it's in their own self-interest to stay home, they're not going to stay home. They're just not. Now, you have an outbreak, it'll get a bunch of people sick. People will self-select and say, I'm not going back. And then they will have no guidance from the government to tell them when it's safe to come out, when it's not safe to come out. They'll just revert back and go, okay, I'm not going to that store. I'm not going to that deli, that restaurant, that movie theater, right? Because of what happened there. Number two, they're like your kid brother, right? You give them money, you give them stuff, and then you're like, hey, when are you going to pay me back my loan? What do they say? What loan? The founding of the United States of America was based on three things. Number one, we don't want to be told what to do, and we will rebel at the point of a gun, like us holding the gun, to rebel. Number two, if we owe too much money, we declare bankruptcy and start over again. Sorry, King George, we can't pay you back. Tell you what, we're going to have a new constitution and everybody's equal, blah, 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 blah. Number three, we say one thing, we do another. All men are created equal, unless the color of your skin is dark. And oh, by the way, if you're female, we don't consider you to be a male. Therefore, you got to wait another 100 years to get the same rights that we got. We as a people, our country is deeply schizophrenic. It's been that way since the first day, and we hate being told what to do. And as long as we understand that, we will deal better with what's going on in society than if we all of a sudden think that there's some code of conduct to be an American and you have to subscribe to it. It is amazing to me how many friends I have, and I really, quite frankly, consider myself to be an independent. And I know this is not a quote unquote political conversation, but I kind of get it out there so we can talk about making money. I really kind of consider myself to be independent. For many, many years, I lived in Virginia. Virginia, you don't declare a political party. Everybody's technically an independent Virginia. I moved to Maryland, like you have to declare. So what did I declare? That which I most closely affiliate with, which is Republican. And then after a while, when I saw some of the stuff the Republicans were like, maybe I'll just be an independent. And then I found out in Maryland being a registered independent, you're nobody.
You can't vote.
You're nobody. Get nothing.
That happened to me.
So you got to pick one, right? Yeah. But philosophically, and I think my Facebook friends and posts kind of reflect this, I'm kind of in the middle. I'm a little more conservative on many things, but I also understand and appreciate other people's positions, and the fringes really scare the bejesus out of me. Having said that, it is interesting to me how many friends I have who identify politically right who are saying, y'all need to put on that mask and stay home. And I have people who are politically left going, we need complete anarchy, take that mask off and just fight for your life. So here's the deal. America's crazy. We may be less crazy than the rest of the world, but America's crazy. You can't get caught up in the crazy, and you can't get caught up in the noise. You got to stay focused on what you got to stay focused on, understanding that everybody else around you may be like chickens with their head cut off, spinning around, and you can't give into that notion. You got to have your game plan. You got to have your mentors, your advisors. You got to know what you want to do, and you got to be ready to. I love to sail. You got to be ready to tack. You got to be ready to ebb and flow based on the changes of the wind. Now, just because the wind is changing, that doesn't mean that you're not trying to go from point A to point B, but sometimes when you're in a sailboat and the wind changes, you just can't go in a straight line. You have to go left for a little bit and then go right for a little bit and left for a little bit and right. And ultimately, right, left for a little bit, right for a little bit, ultimately you do get to your destination. And sometimes when the wind's at your back, you just put up the jib and you just, you know, and you just, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as somebody who wants to be somewhat in control of your destiny, at least that which God lets you be in control of, you can't get caught up in the noise, and you can't get caught up in the herd mentality and the sheep way of thinking. And right now, quite frankly, there are all kinds of different herds of sheep, and some of whom think we're going back to the way it was. That ain't going to happen. And some of whom think, well, hey, let's just go ahead and get this thing over with and don't worry about it. And that's not going to happen. And somewhere in between, you're going to figure out what you need to do and guide your business, guide yourself, and guide your family accordingly. All right, enough for the politics. Barry, what you want to talk about?
All right, thanks. So one of the things that we're going to look at is, I'll just go through this really quickly, and then I know we have some questions. So just understand that, you know, initially, in terms of business, we're all in a state of shock. I remember when I actually text my pastor to let him know they're going to be shutting Maryland down. He's like, there's no way they can do that. How can they shut churches down? I said, I'm telling you, you need to prepare. Churches are going to be shut down. I heard it from a reliable source. And he didn't believe me. 2 days later, everything was shut down. So I think we've gotten through the shock. There may be a shock wave coming later on down the road, but we're dealing with that. And then, when people get desperate, they overreact. So as a business owner, you need to make sure that you're calm, you're calculated, it's gonna be all right. I look back, I'm actually excited now because in 2008, I did not know my left from my right. This business that I have today came out of, excuse me, the 2008 downturn, that everything that happened with the mortgage industry. So the last 12 years of me building my business was actually during a downturn. We are in a much better place now in 2020 because we have the skill sets and the know-how. We know where to get the knowledge, the information. So there's no need to overreact. We definitely need to evaluate and pick the right things that we're going to do and avoid the wrong things. And we need to take decisive action. And then we need to look at the burst and surge session. There's probably going to be a surge after COVID-19. So one of the things, I'm not going to talk about the tax things. I know we're going to deal with that, but we need to look for the root cause of why does your company need a loan? Why is it going through issues right now? What are some of the things that we need to do to reinvent ourselves in business? And that's what we're going to spend our time talking about. Look for the root cause of why your company may need a loan, why it may be going down, why it doesn't have enough cushion, enough margin, enough staff to be able to handle whatever it is that's going on now. So with that, I'm going to segue into Aaron and Miguel's question. They had a concern that their business, that some renters may stop paying rent. So that's one of the things that we need to look at. How do we deal with this market where landlords are dealing with tenants who are not paying or taking advantage of the situation? I'll talk about my own personal example, and then I'll let Sherman respond. If anybody else has a response, you're free to speak up or just, post it here. So my property has been empty since March, but I stopped collecting rent since last November. So nothing to do with the whole coronavirus. I just had a tenant who stopped paying, wouldn't communicate, wouldn't say anything. Later on, finally, when the whole eviction was scheduled, he told me that the reason he stopped paying was that he lost his job. Well, he didn't communicate. He didn't say anything. I said I was willing to work with you, and he ended up moving out. I've gotten, had to get the place fixed, $12,000. You got to pay out of pocket. And then now I'm looking at renting it. So what I want to talk about is what are the things that I did with the rental property, first of all, and then two, things that I did with the tenants to kind of have a cushion of dealing with things when you don't have the money that you're expecting. So, excuse me, the first thing that I did was that I did a 15-year loan. So I didn't do a 30-year loan on that rental property. I did a 15-year because I figured the sooner that I can pay that property off, the less my risk of not having that property rented will be. So even though I did not have the property rented for what? This is 5 months, yeah, rented for 7 months, I still was okay because how much am I paying every month for this property? Only about $800 a month. And that's because I have it over 15 years. The second thing that I did is that I have a $500 cash flow in the property every month. So because I have that $500 cash flow, this tenant has been in the property since 2011. You know, so if you look at from 2011 to 2019, that's 8 years at $500 a month. That's $6,000 times 8 years. That's a whole 40 grand reserve and savings towards paying down the property and keeping money so that if anything happens, I'm able to handle something like this. So if I really were to extrapolate it over the 9-year period, it's almost like I had the property empty one month for each year. If you look at it, because it's been empty for 7 months. The tenant has been there since 2011. They moved out, you know, in 2020. So I've had 9 years. So one thing is, whatever cash flow that you're getting from your rental properties, you don't want to turn around and use it for your current expenses. You want to have it saved or reinvested so that that money is able to help you to continue building your passive income. The second thing that I did was, depending on where a tenant is, I always ask for 2 months security deposit. So the 2-month security deposit is to protect me because of the amount of time that it takes from when you file the court papers to when the eviction happens. I mean, as soon as they stop paying, and that's another thing, as soon as they stop paying by the 10th, I go and I get that paperwork filed. So I did file the paperwork in October. The eviction didn't happen until March, you know. So, but having 2 months security deposit kind of gave me a cushion, so that by the time the whole thing really happened, really I was out, what, about 3 months. I know how to file my evictions. I know how to do all of that, going to the court and filing, going through that whole process. Now, the third thing that helped me, which we also need to look into, is that, one, I have very good relationships with my handyman and contractors and all that. And the contractor was so gracious to just, he didn't take the whole $12,000 from me. He took only about $3,000 and got the property ready. And now we have an arrangement that I'm going to pay him off gradually. And I was able to give him some money last week. I'll do another one. I'll keep doing it till I'm done. Why do I have that kind of relationship? He handles all of my properties. Anything happens, he deals with the tenants. I don't try to haggle him on price, whatever it is. You know, I try and I give him good referrals. So I feel like these 3 things kind of helped me to weather the storm. The bottom line is that we're not always going to have properties that have tenants in them. So it shouldn't just be because of COVID-19. This should already be principles that we're putting in place to protect our business. One, reduce your debt, eliminate your debt. You should, yes, it's good to leverage debt, but make sure that you're not taking calculated risk. Make sure that when you're purchasing properties, that you have at least enough months that if a tenant ever moves out, that you will be okay. Secondly, make sure you're doing your due diligence. If that person doesn't have good rental history or good, you know, depending on their job, I always do 1/3. Their take-home pay needs to be at least 1/3 of what they're paying in rent. If they don't do that, I ask for 2 months security deposit. And then the third thing is developing a really good relationship with handyman out there who would work with you if you ever got into a financial bind. So those are the 3 things that I'm doing. So if that's not what you're currently doing right now, think about it. It will definitely happen. But I must confess, it's based off of knowledge that I've learned over the past 15 years. Those first set of properties that we had back in 2005, you know, once a tenant stops paying, you have to keep paying this mortgage. After a while, you can't pay, and then those properties had to be foreclosed on. So I learned the hard way that it's not as important as how many properties that I have, as it is the quality of the properties and being able to hold it long-term to finish paying that mortgage. So just kind of start looking at every property, analyzing what kind of funds you have available. And if it looks like right now the market is still hot, like, so if you need to get rid of 1 or 2 properties, so that you're able to maintain the other ones fine. But if you have reserves where you're able to hold on to things, if you can refinance, whatever you can do right now so that you're able to hold on to the properties. Sherman, do you have a comment? Anybody else, do you want to say anything about dealing with tenants right now who are not paying?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what you said. I would probably add a couple more thoughts that I was actually taking some notes. I would say exactly like Ebere said, you want to build a good team, and not just the handyman, but your total team. And I oftentimes say owning real estate or being in the real estate business is like owning a professional sports franchise. You're going to have to be ready to change the coach from time to time, change your star players from time to time. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a team that wins championships. If you own a professional sports franchise, you can make a lot of money even if your team's sort of a break even. Ask Dan Snyder and the Washington Redskins about that one, right? But the bottom line is, if you approach it as I need to build a team and give my team clear direction and let my team do their job, and then every once in a while, yeah, I'm going to have to step in because either a player is sidelined or I have a player that I have to take out and I'm in between replacing them. But that sort of mindset of, get the best talent you can. Again, in real estate, almost everybody, quite frankly, is getting paid by the transaction. If you have a property manager, oftentimes your property management contracts say you get paid based on what you collect. You don't get paid. If I don't get paid, you don't get paid. And that sort of keeps everybody on the same side of the table. We had to replace a property manager last year. Property manager that I replaced last July was stealing from me, and I knew he was stealing from me. And I had my accountant looking at it. My accountant was like, everything's okay. By the way, that was not Ebere. And so now I'm thinking, okay, maybe I need to replace the accountant too. This was my in-house bookkeeper. But when we finally removed him, it was very clear he had stolen probably close to $25,000, $30,000 from us over a period of 2 or 3 years. But I knew it. I knew it in my gut. And again, if you sort of come from this business from the bottom up as opposed to the top down, in other words, you get your first rental property and you manage it yourself, you know when you're being flim-flammed when you start hiring people to take stuff over. And that's exactly what he was doing to us. We paid him for work to be done on the units. He would hire somebody to do the work. And then after they got halfway through, he would fire them and keep the rest of the money. So the work never fully got done, but he got paid. And as I had a mentor who was in the real estate business once say to me, you never get what you expect, you only get what you inspect. And I was not doing a good job of inspecting what this property manager was doing. So long story short, we fired the guy, brought in a new property manager, and the new property manager, he and I just butted heads the whole time. But the guy who recommended him, my attorney who recommended him, said, listen, the guy's not this and he's not that, but he's honest. And he's as honest as the day is long. Well, he was honest. He was brutally honest. Like we had two side-by-side townhouses we built in Baltimore before the recession that we were going to sell. We bought them, we fixed them up, we were going to flip them. And the market turned on us, we couldn't flip them, so we turned them into rentals. Well, it turns out the basement, which was fully finished but did not have a window, did not have an exit door, the prior property manager was renting the house out as a 4-bedroom. And the new property manager said, that's an illegal bedroom. I will not rent that unit as a bedroom because it's not a bedroom. So now we went from 4 bedrooms to 3 bedrooms. We went from $3,200 a month to $2,700 a month, which is the difference between, quite frankly, barely breaking even to now having a loss. And he and I butted heads on that over and over again. And finally, I called my attorney. I said, listen, this guy Frank's telling me that I can't rent it out as a 4. It's got to be a 3, and I just don't. And my attorney's like, well, he's right. And if you do try to rent it out as a 4 and it's only a 3, and somebody dies or a fire breaks out or whatever, you're going to have bigger problems than the fact that you made a couple extra $100. You in the city of Baltimore, you have to register the unit as it is, and if you lie on the paperwork, you're in trouble with the city. And if something bad goes wrong, you're going to be liable, and possibly criminally liable, if you said something is that it's not. So don't play games. Listen to Frank, do what he says. Right? So long story short, we got through that. And then we did wind up turning around the apartment building, had to spend about $10,000, had to bring in a contractor, fire a contractor. You know the story. You've heard Ebere said it a million times. There's a reason why they call them contractors, right? And so brought in a guy to fix the roof, and he didn't really fix the roof. So I had to bring in somebody else to fix the roof who actually did fix the roof. But we got all the units fixed up, and interesting enough, we started leasing units around January, and I said to the property manager, I want $950 a month. I want $950. He said, Sherman, you're not going to get $950. I'm like, what are you talking about? I got 2 tenants in there now, $950. And he's like, you're not going to get it. So I was like, what do you recommend? He says, I recommend $850. So I fought with him, and for 30 days, we tried to market it at $950. We got no nibbles whatsoever. And then I'm like, okay, Frank, drop it down to $850.
Yes,
Lo and
that's
behold,
the best email. I mean, I get your email saying there's a meeting. I fill out this.
so lo and behold, we actually wound up leasing up 5 units in 30 days by dropping the price from $950 to $850. He was right, I was wrong. And again, that's the beauty of having people who know what they're doing, even if they don't agree with you and you have sort of a healthy debate. Ultimately, you're like, okay, we tried it my way, let's try it your way. Like, oh, okay, he was right. Boom. And it's a whole lot, trust me, it's a whole lot better to have a 12-unit apartment building where all 12 units are rented up, even if you get an $850, than to have a 12-unit apartment building and have 6 empty units because you are fighting for an extra $100 a month that you're not going to get.
Which by the time you even look at, if you did it over 12 months, just 1 month, and that whole extra $100 is gone.
Bingo. Now on that property, all of those tenants that just came in are all Section 8. And he got me to look at that, and he got me moving in that direction pre-coronavirus. Today, I'm going glory hallelujah, because Section 8, and I think they're paying $10 each, and Section 8's paying $840 each. I get that $840 every month without fail. And trust me on this one, 100%, X percent of something is worth more than 100% of nothing all day long. And I see so many of my friends on Facebook and other groups who are like, oh, I would never take on a Section 8 tenant. They're singing a totally different song today, knowing the government is always going to pay if you have a contract with the government. And so that's been a real godsend. Second thing I would talk about, and it was in my notes, you got to have principles. You got to know what you stand for. And hopefully one of those principles is being fair. Being firm, but being fair. So I've got another property in Bowie that after having fired property managers twice, I just decided to manage this one myself. And interesting enough, I have a pastor in there. And when the pastor came in, he had, back in 2010, he had some challenges because of what had happened in the economy. And I said, look, I know you're pastor, and I won't hold that against you, but I won't hold that for you either. Your credit's kind of a mess. So in order for me to lease this house to you, I need for 3 of the deacons from the church to sign personally for your lease. And they did. That's how much they believed in him. I didn't know him from Boo. Right. And I'm a religious person, and I believe in taking care of the man of God. But you're also a tenant, and I gotta put that right alongside of, hey, you're a pastor. So long story short, we've had some issues over the years with him, nothing major. But in April or March, he didn't pay the rent. And I had Lisa, who manages that, Lisa's my assistant. She really manages that particular property. She reached out to him and didn't get anywhere. And then finally, his assistant called her back. And Lisa comes to me and says, hey, he's saying that he doesn't have to pay the rent because the county says that there's a rent moratorium, blah, blah, blah. I said, Lisa, tell his assistant this. Number one, he does have to pay the rent. It's not a moratorium on rent. It's a moratorium on evictions. And tell him he needs to pay the rent. And if he doesn't pay the rent, first thing I'm going to do is send a certified letter to those 3 deacons who are still on the hook for this lease, even though we're now 8 years into the lease. And number 2, we will file for eviction. And as soon as the courthouse reopens, and if they're closed for 2 or 3 months, he'll be the first one that we evict. Now, that's pretty firm, right? And I went, Sherman, you talk to a man of God that way? No, I talked to my assistant who talked to his assistant who talked to him that way.
In God we trust. Everybody else pay your rent, okay? In God we trust.
So I was firm, but I was fair. So he wound up paying the rent in 2 pieces. He paid roughly 2/3 a couple of days later and paid the rest before the end of the month. And lo and behold, the 1st of May, and I think this happened in March, the 1st of May and the 1st of April, he paid both on time, without fail, without question. Now, my accountant takes a look at the situation and says, shouldn't we be charging him late fees for the 1/3 he paid late? I'm like, come on, give it a rest. Let's be fair, right? Why do we want to kick over a hornet's nest we don't need to go kick? No, forget about billing him for late fees. Well, in the past, I said, but in the past, we didn't have the coronavirus, etc. In addition to which, Prince George's County came out with a program for rental assistance, And the second it came out, I copied the URL for the website and I copied the basic information and I sent it to Lisa and I said, please tell Pastor so-and-so about this program. He may or may not qualify, but we want at least to let him know what's out there and available to him if he needs it. And didn't hear anything more back on that. But again, you got to have your own core principle. You know, what do you believe? Why are you doing what you're doing? Be prepared to be firm, but also to be fair. And again, as I oftentimes say to folks, in fact, I just had this conversation with my wife and my son yesterday. Yeah, you got a piece of paper that's a legal document called a lease, right? And again, I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV, even though I did go to law school. And I'm certainly not a CPA, not even close to it, right? I took one accounting class in college and my head hurt. I literally was curled up on the floor like during the midterm. But I know enough about legal documents, whether they be leases, sales contracts, etc. Pieces of paper are for when everything goes wrong. Pieces of paper are for when the other side doesn't do what they're supposed to do. But you don't manage your business based on what's on the piece of paper. You need to have a more cordial, more cooperative, more partnering kind of relationship. But if it does go wrong, either because of acts of God, or it does go wrong because the other side decides to act like a horse's patoot, then you got the piece of paper that says, I need for you to do what we agreed to do, or we're going to have to go to court, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But again, the whole idea of a contract is not that we're going to pull out the contract every time there's an issue. The whole idea of a contract is this is what we're going to do when it really falls apart. Otherwise, you want to attempt, in other words, you want to have the contract. Like, don't ever go into business with somebody. Don't let somebody move into your house without a contract, without a lease. But once you have that piece of paper, put it in the drawer and manage the relationship as best you can based on what's fair. And if the other side decides to not be fair, you still have the piece of paper to draw from. And then last thing, and I sort of said this at the beginning, you kind of want to know why you're doing certain things. We originally built those properties up in Baltimore not to be rentals. We built them to sell them. So every once in a while, every 6 months or so, I still look at what's going on in the market, go, is now a good time to sell? And even though they're rentals and even though they cash flow nicely, it may be the time to sell just because that was what the original intent was. On the other hand, the apartment building was never supposed to be sold. It's supposed to be, and so when it comes time to fix stuff, I'm not fixing stuff in the apartment necessarily on the cheap, because it is my intention to probably hold that for another 5-10 years. It's a nice little moneymaker. It's a nice little cash cow. But your decisions need to be rooted in why are you doing what you're doing? And situations on the ground may change and you may have to change your tactics temporarily, but your fundamental principles should never change. And you should always make sure that you're checking in with yourself or checking in with your business partner to say, hey, I know we did this for the past couple of years, but do we want to continue doing this or do we want to do something else? Because fundamentally, when we first did this, we said we're doing it for this reason. And maybe we need to go back to that reason. So those are sort of my 3 thoughts.
Thank you. So I have 2 comments here. One, started down the path of doing bi-weekly paychecks for the PPP withdrawals, 5/15/6/26. I know that is as a paycheck. Prior last session, you said to notate owner compensation or guaranteed payment. Should I go with one or the other for my situation? Also, should I keep the bi-weekly or just 1 or 2 lump sums? I like the lump sum because you have that flexibility as a solopreneur, self-employed. You don't have to go on the weekly, bi-weekly. You can just do it twice. And the other reason why I actually suggest that is it gives you the flexibility to wait on laws to come out or more guidance to come out, because everything that's been coming out now is more of approving the PPP loans and getting people funded. I'm sure in the next 2 weeks, everyone is going to start switching gear to the forgiveness and more guidance, and they're going to realize that some things are messed up and not necessarily favoring the small business owners. And that's why I said doing 2 checks is better. I don't think the name that you have on it matters. You can say owner compensation or guaranteed payment. Either one is fine. The next thing is, okay, taking over property management. Yes, this is exactly what we mean by transition. I, for one, cannot, even when I had properties in New York, in California, and New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, I did not hire a property management company. I felt that I needed to have that experience. Like Sherman said, you kind of need to have that experience of managing properties yourself. So that when somebody starts telling you, oh, it costs this to do this, or when a tenant starts saying, I can pay my rent, you know exactly the kind of language that you need to use, or you know how to file things in court. If a property manager starts telling you, oh, it takes 3 months, no, you already know that, no, that thing takes only 45 days. So I manage my properties myself, even the ones that are out of town, because I figured that there's really 3 aspects to property management. Collecting money. As an accountant, why wouldn't I know how to collect money? If I don't know how to collect money, then I just need to shut down my whole business. So I don't need anybody collecting money. I know how to do that. The next thing is managing the tenant relationship. What is it that you need to manage in the tenant relationship? It really boils down to having a good handyman, good contractor, and stuff in place. If you have that in place, why do you need a property manager who doesn't know how to go out there and shop for, you know, cost that is fair and reasonable? They will tend to go with the one that is highest. And sometimes I found out that the property managers make a money or make a spread off of what they're quoting you in repair costs. So you end up paying more. There's nobody that will manage your property better than you can. And then the third reason is if you have to deal with court cases, well, you're able to hire an attorney just for that piece. I don't need to have a property manager who's going to go file things in court and go represent me. How many times do you have to do that? So I know how to do that myself. And that's why I handle property management myself. So yes, I agree. That's one of the way to pivot and transition. One, you're saving that money. Two, you're tightening up. Kind of what you're saying in terms of taking over the property management is you're saying that you're cutting back on expenses. I think everybody needs to cut back on expenses right now. Even if everything looks okay, try to go down 10, 15%. It doesn't matter what you can do. Is what if you don't need that 10, 15% cut? Well, at the end of the year, give yourself a bonus or do something, you know, next year. You need to really cut down right now because like we said, there's going to be, whether it's after the election or whether it's whether it's when the weather gets cold again, or whether it's when people all of a sudden have lost jobs and are not able to get jobs because all these businesses are now going out of business. We are going to have pandemic 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and they may be happening at the same time. So this is not the time to continue, you know, doing things that you're comfortable with. If you can do without 15% of your expenses, cut down right now and adjust and have that money in reserves and savings so that you're able to react when needed.
So hey, Ebere, can I respond to what you just said? So I totally agree with what Ebere just said. I would add to what you just said, the third point that I made before, which is you need to know why you're doing what you're doing. And for me, right, and this is not like, well, Ebere said this and Sherman said, no, you have to decide what's right for you. Again, getting back to the earlier preamble I gave, one of the great things about being an American is you are free to succeed and you are free to fail. And you have to decide what's right for you, and what's right for you may not be the same conclusion of another. Two reasonable people can look at the same set of facts and walk away with a slightly different opinion. Not different set of facts, but different opinion. So as an example, on the property that I have in Bowie, initially I decided I was going to hire a property manager because that was the house that my wife and I lived in before we built our new house. And my logic at the time was, I don't want to be too emotionally attached to the situation for fear of I might make some bad decisions. So I had a young man who had been banging on the door, begging to be property manager, asking for a chance. And quite frankly, looking at that house and knowing what I know about that house and knowing about that neighborhood, it seemed like almost a no-brainer because it would be a really easy property to manage. Well, without naming any names, although the guy's name is Chris, Chris Smith. I'm sorry, not Chris Smith. His name is Corey Brown. And Corey Brown.
Oh, Lord. Oh, my. Okay. I'm sorry. I forgot we were being recorded.
There you go. Yeah, like every time I tell it like that, they go, oh my God, not that guy, right? Corey, in 2008, when my wife and I built our new house and we're moving in, convinced me to give him a chance. I gave him a chance. It ended horribly. And so after having him on the property, what's the Tyler Perry movie, I Can Do Bad All by Myself? I decided that, hey, this property is the next neighborhood over. When I walk my dog for the long walks we go by, I'll just manage this one by myself. And I asked my attorney to draft a lease that, in his own words, when he gave it to me, he said, I'm giving it to you, but if you ever find yourself back in a rental situation, don't you ever sign anything that looks like this. And it's got you 9 ways to Sunday as a tenant. Again, haven't really had to use it, but in those rare instances where I had to use it, it's been very effective having that person know, I got 3 deacons on the lease as co-signatures. You're supposed to be doing this, 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 and this. And out of fairness, I've done some of the things, but according to the lease, you're supposed to be doing. And it's always managed to sort of get the guy back in line when he wanted to sort of go off the rails. And so managing that property has been really a piece of cake. It really has. And it took a bad property manager for me to realize everything that Ebere says is true. Like, at the end of the day, he didn't take anybody to court. He didn't collect the rents. He didn't even know who was living in the property, for crying out loud, right? The original person on the lease had left, gone back to Jamaica, and there were 2 boo-boo the fools living in the house that weren't even on the lease. I mean, it was horrible, right? So, and when I finally got them out and started fixing the house up, the night they left, somebody came back and stole the air conditioning. No, gee, what a coincidence, right? So now $4,000 or $5,000 for a new 3-ton unit, right? So, but the bottom line is this. I totally agree with what Ebere said on that one. Now, I got a 12-unit apartment building in Baltimore that from time to time I have said, well, I could, and then I'm like, what are you thinking? You got 12 people. On any given month, 3 or 4 of them are a problem with collecting their part of the rent. Are you really going to be wanting to run back and forth to Baltimore to deal with this and deal with that? And I'm like, no, I don't. I'll just go ahead and pay the property manager I think he gets a 10% cut above the rent. And then I just do a really, really, really good job now, having been burned by a previous property manager, of really managing him. And he says to me, well, hey, I need to get X, Y, and Z fixed. Can I have my contractor come in? I said, go ahead and get an estimate. And he'll get the estimate. And I said, okay, great. Now I'll have my contractor go in. So it turns out that of all the contractors I've worked with, the best one, although he's oftentimes more expensive, is my housekeeper's husband. And he's always looking for work. So I'm like, Christian, and he lives in Northern Virginia. I'm like, Christian, can you run to Baltimore, take a look at this, and tell me what it would cost? And I will white out, so to speak, the cost numbers, but I'll give him the list that the contractor did, the itemized list, said, hey, tell me what you think. And Christian is consistently 20% to 25% below what my property manager will get. And on top of which, Ebere is absolutely correct, the property manager will not only get an inflated price, he or she will typically add 8 to 10% on top of that as their fee for managing the contractor. And in one particular case, a property manager I fired years ago, they did a halfway decent job, but they just weren't running the building efficiently. When I actually did my due diligence, come to find out they actually owned the construction company that was doing the work. So they were technically double dipping. All right. Now, here's the point. I have the property manager manage that property because I just don't want to deal with it, not on a day in, day out basis. It's just, and when I add up what they earn for a fee and say, okay, if I did it myself, I could save that amount of money. I'm like, no. But I do have to remind myself, I have to manage the property manager. And again, Ebere is absolutely correct. The best way to do that is having done it at least once yourself. And there are things you will do on your first single family house rental property or first condo rental property or first townhouse rental property that directly translate into how you will manage your property manager should you choose to hire one for a bigger project. But having said that, even though I'm a property manager, there are certain things that I still will engage somebody else to do and not have my property manager do. And I think in the past several months that the guys been managing the unit, Christian has done all of the cleanup, all the fix up, all the repairs. And I think there was one instance where Christian was not available where I did say to Frank, okay, go ahead and have your guy do it. Oh, I know what it was. Turns out that we were seeing evidence that rats were digging holes around the dumpster, and we wanted to catch that before they got into the building. And Frank did have his contractor eradicate them and then fill in the holes with concrete, et cetera, et cetera. And it just, again, it was easier to have him do it, even though I'm paying a premium on it. But Ebere is absolutely correct. But I think, again, you got to decide, why are you doing this and what is it that you want to achieve and what are your objectives? And one of my objectives is to make more, work less. And I can make more, work less if I'm willing to pay people to do what I could do myself. But when I look at the dollars and cents go, nah, I'll pay somebody. It's just easier. And I think again, It's not a matter of who's right, who's wrong. And then fundamentally, I think we're kind of saying the same thing, but it is a matter of you deciding what do you want your life to look like, and orchestrating and building a life around, and your business activities around what you want your life to look like, versus doing all these different activities. And then you have a life that's like helter skelter and you need to take a break from your life. I'm all about, I want my life for this next whatever number of years God gives me, or months, because the coronavirus is still out there. I want it to be a reflection of what I want my life to look like, and my business will follow, not having a bit, because I did that. In my younger years, I had a business that had 125 employees. It was totally out of control, and I was out of control. Many of you guys who may know my story know that we run the private jet terminal at National Airport. I was also one of the biggest federal government contractors during the RTC economic downturn of the early 90s. And I had, as a young kid, 30 some, almost 40 years old, I had a business that was grossing $36 million a year. And I was divorced, overweight, living in a townhouse in Old Town Alexandria all by myself, making $500,000 a year, and totally miserable. And part of the reason for that was A, immaturity, and B, this burning need to be involved in every single decision. And quite frankly, if you hire good people and you want to be involved in every single decision, they're going to quit. And I don't care whether they're W-2 employees or they're 1099 contractors. So at a certain point, you got to vision what you want your life to look like. Get the best counsel, get the best advice. But look, hey, if you decide you want to manage the property for yourself, more power to you. And if you decide you want to hire a property manager, more power to you. Just do the best you can with what you got, but know why you're doing what you're doing, and making sure that you're making the right decisions because it's right for you.
Thank you. And just to wrap that up, and then we'll take another question as we finish up here. Managing my property that's like 20 minutes away from here was no different from managing my property that was in North Carolina or New York or Pennsylvania. It was kind of like the same. So being out of town didn't make a difference. Another thing that I forgot to mention is that I have very good relationships with realtors who are flat fee MLS listing realtors. So you have some realtors that would agree to do a flat fee MLS listing. It's the same thing I did with this property now that I'm getting ready to sign a new lease on. I'll just pay a flat fee to get the property rented, because the most important thing is that they get it into the MLS. And then you get all the calls, all the phone calls. You put a lockbox there, you can schedule a showing. Luckily, what happens is for the properties that are out of town, every time I have to do a showing, I just pay the flat fee MLS and they go out and they do the showing. In some cases, we can just use the camera with the lockbox and allow the person go in, ask certain questions, because sometimes the tenants don't always know these things that we know. Like we'll ask for driver's license information, date of birth, expiration. It helps me to gauge whether that person is an honest person and whether I can let them into the property with just the monitor and the lockbox. But having a flat fee MLS really, really helped, because I knew that if I had to do like a walkthrough and that I couldn't handle myself, I could always call them and they charge me $100 a visit. So on a $2,500 rent a month, having to pay $100 for a visit was not that much. So I forgot to add that piece. So we'll have one more question here. Somebody said that the
Hey, Ebere, can I we got time for me to just sort of tackle that out-of-town management issue?
Yeah, because this one is going to pivot after we do that.
Okay, so we have a high-level mastermind group, what we call our VIP Elite Mastermind Group. And we used to do quarterly meetings pre-COVID. Now we do meetings every 2 weeks, but they're shorter. We used to do like all day, and now we do sort of shorter, like 2 hour. And folks who are part of that group can bring issues to the table, and they get the benefit and the wisdom of having people that are surrounded with who are have 6 and 7 figure real estate businesses. And one of our newer members asked the question. She said, Sherman, I make a pretty good living. Now she's relatively new mom. I think her babies are like 2 and 4 and 6. She says, but I have a property that I inherited down in North Carolina, and I want to say it was Raleigh, but it almost doesn't matter. It's a smaller town than, let's say, Washington, D.C. And she says, I'm thinking about quitting my job and moving to North Carolina and managing the rehab on the property and then getting it set up to rent. And I asked her a couple of quick questions, as well as some of the other members in the group, but fundamentally, here's what we came down to. There is a real estate agent who is a longtime family friend and is an investor and has helped her family over the years with real estate decisions. in this community. And she has seen the property and given her an estimate to fix it up and given her an estimate to manage it for her. And so fundamentally, we walk through this exercise of saying, okay, what does your job pay, right? And what would it cost you to hire this person? And it was very clear that her job paid a whole lot more than what she would have saved by being her own property manager. But her logic at the time, at the beginning of the conversation of why I would want to do this is because, quote unquote, my mom is down there and I can spend time with my mom. And I said to her, well, what kind of time are you going to be spending with your mom? Like every single day you're asking mom to watch the kids. You're in there going toe to toe with the contractors. You're in there, every one of them, right? The roofing contractor, the painting contractor, right? And then you're coming back home tired, maybe a little angry, maybe a little frustrated because things don't typically go the way we want them to go. Hey, Murphy was an optimist, right? Murphy's Law, Murphy was an optimist, right? And I said, what's the quality of that time going to look like versus you being able to structure a deal with this family friend who is a real estate agent, who is a real estate investor, who is capable of doing those and has managed construction on her own projects. What's the quality of time going to be like? A, you going down doing this yourself and then spending time with mom, or B, you just simply going down to manage the contractor slash manager and then tacking on a day or two ahead of or a day or two behind where you deal business with business and then cut it off and deal with mom, right? And then I asked her the magic question. And then I think this is a magic question everybody has to ask themselves if they're thinking about hiring somebody. I said, is the person that you know trustworthy? And she said, yes. I said, on both counts. She said, what do you mean? I said, every person that you want to hire has to pass a 2-level of trust question. Question number 1, are they trustworthy? Are they a trustworthy person? And I said to her, would you trust her to watch your kids for a day while you're off doing something else? And without a hesitation, she said, absolutely. I said, great, then she's trustworthy. However, you can hire people who are trustworthy who don't have a clue what they're doing. So the second level of trust is she competent in doing the things that you're asking her to do? And she thought about that for a second. She said, yeah, based on her experience, based on what I've seen over the years, she's competent at managing the property. She's competent at rehabbing the property. She's competent at dealing with all the different issues that are going to happen at the county/city level. It's like, great. She has passed the 2 levels of trust. She's trustworthy and she knows what she's doing. Because you can hire somebody who's trustworthy who doesn't know what they're doing, and you can hire somebody who knows what they're doing, but they ain't trustworthy. And either one will end in a bad result. And then I said to her the last piece of advice, and I hope this is instructive, and then I'll shut up here. I said, make sure that if you're asking her to do 3 things, number 1, manage the contractor to get the property rehab. Number 2, get it through all the city inspection processes, et cetera, to get it ready to be leased and then get it leased. And then number 3, managing the property. I said, make sure that you look at each one of those 3 areas and price them fairly and accordingly, but make sure in your agreement with her, all of her compensation or most of her compensation is based on what you want to see happen. She's like, what do you mean? I said, well, what do you think it would cost to hire a contractor? She said, probably 10% of the construction costs. I said, what are the construction costs? She said, roughly about 20 to 30,000, but I think it's going to be 40. Okay, great. You're going to pay her $4,000 to manage the contractor. Don't pay her $4,000 to manage the contractor. Pay her $2,000 to manage the contractor and give her another $2,000 bonus when she gets the house leased up with a decent tenant. I said, what's it going to cost to get through all the approval process and get the house leased up? She said, probably first month's rent. I said, great. Don't give her first month's rent. Give her half of first month's rent and then give her the other half 30 days later when she's demonstrated that that was the right decision on the tenant. And then, of course, what's the prime man? So the bottom line was this. Pay the person fairly. Pay them what you would pay somebody independently, but make sure you structure those payments in such a way that that the payment for her outcome is exactly in line with the payment for your outcome. It doesn't do you any good to get a house fixed up and not get it leased up. Doesn't do you any good to go through all the inspection process and get a tenant in there if you got to put the tenant out 30 days later because they're a bad tenant. At the end of the day, she's going to pay X amount of money. Better to pay X amount of money by splitting basically 30% up front, but then 60% or 70%, excuse me, at the back end when she actually gets the outcome that she wants. And that was the advice we gave her. She was very happy with that advice. Hopefully, as people are listening, that may be instructive for them.
Thank you. So we're getting ready to wrap up here in the next 5-10 minutes, but I want everybody, I know Aaron and Miguel have kind of told us how they're transitioning. Can everybody just tell me what is one thing that you're planning to do to transition in this environment so that Sherman and I can weigh in on it? So just answering a question, do the COVID laws for record keeping change? No, the laws are still the same in terms of the record keeping requirement in order to be a real estate professional. Again, remember, to be a real estate professional, you need to spend at least 750 hours in real estate, which is about 14 hours a week, and not or more time in real estate than in any other active profession. This is different from the requirement in order for your rental to be considered an active trade or business for the 20% QBID deduction. That just requires you to spend at least 250 hours a year actively managing the property. If you do that, then you're able to get the 20% QBID deduction for your rental trade or business. So as we come down now, I just need everybody to check out, and the way you're checking out is let me know, send it by chat or you can speak it out. What is one transition that you are making during this period so that your business can be sustainable? I do want us to get to December and everybody still has their business intact. So what is one thing that you're doing? You can send it to me as a chat, or you can send it, you can speak it out if you need to. I'll talk about one thing that I'm doing in my business. I've seen the importance of having the right team in place. So I'm trying to use this opportunity to see if I can have the right team in place, because I believe that if I have the right team, that we will be able to grow. Even though I'm not necessarily looking for growth, but I will not turn down customers when they come. So just continuing to work on having the right team, tightening up on expenses and making sure that we have enough reserve, because later on, there's not going to be any money available to give us when this whole business, and then just know that it's coming and kind of mentally preparing. Because I think sometimes what I've realized is not that you're in a downturn or something bad happened, it's just really about your response to it and how you're reacting to it and handling the news or the shock of what's going on. So I also know that I'm taking things easy and not necessarily stressing myself out. I have, clients calling about the PPP questions on EIDL, and you have CPAs stressing themselves out. You guys can tell when you talk to me that I'm not stressing myself out for nobody, especially when the rules are going to be changing. The guidance is going to be changing. So why am I running around and not catching enough sleep when they're going to come out with guidance later on? And as you can see, all the advice I've been given is take it slow. We're going to get more guidance. There's no need to rush it. There's no need to force it. Because sometimes when you get so much of that information, you get information overload, and then you're not making the right decisions. So I have to make the right decisions for you as clients, but I also have to make the right decisions for me, also as a business owner. So that's kind of like my transition, what I'm doing, taking things slow, making sure that I have the right team in place, and just, spending more time with family. Sherman, what are you doing to transition? I need everybody to send me a chat. I'm not getting any chats here. Oh, sorry. Okay, Sherman, what are you doing to transition?
So we're doing a lot of stuff. All of it, of course, still conforms to our core principles. So our core beliefs, our core principles, our core philosophies have not changed, and they will not change. Having said that, the way we go about doing what we do has changed. And I think the number one principle that everybody needs to take to heart, and you may want to write this one down if you have pencil and paper. You ready? Do it now. Do it now. One of the things that Ebere has certainly seen in her own business, as well as being an advisor to different clients, is the number of people who sat on the sidelines wanting to wait and see when it came to submitting their applications. And program after program after program wound up getting cut off, and people being told, if you have not submitted your application now, don't even bother. There has been some reprieve, like PPP, they did reopen the door, and Prince George's County did wind up putting more money into their program, although even Prince George's County still has not extended the deadline. So the deadline for the Prince George's County program, to the best of my knowledge, is midnight tomorrow. So if you are in any way, shape, or form thinking, hey, maybe I should go after some of this money. And look, I get it. There's a lot of small business owners out there that are so busy running their businesses, they're not even thinking about these different loan programs. But by the time they get around to thinking about it, the door's already closed. And Ebere is absolutely correct. The rules just, I mean, it's just like being out in the middle of the ocean on a boat without a motor. You're just all back and forth. EIDL said, hey, we're going to give you $10,000. That's the SBA program. We'll give you $10,000 even if we reject your loan. And then that became, okay, we'll give you up to $10,000 even if you reject your loan. And now it's like, you know, if you didn't submit your application,
you ain't getting
you get
jack,
nothing.
agricultural business.
So we all need to adopt a do it now philosophy. That's number one. Number two, you got to have core principles. You know, like one of the things we have at Real Investors is we have this big board that looks like the Empire State Building, and it states what we stand for. And it was really our core principles that caused me to close our doors a week before everybody else did. And I thank God that we did, because there's no telling how many of our folks might have gotten sick if we had gone ahead and had that 60-person meeting on on March the 13th, Saturday, March 13th. We were all ready to go, or 13th or 14th, whatever it was. And at the last minute, I just said to myself, hey, can I really afford to have my customers and members get sick? No, that's not a good idea. A lot of people say, well, they're big, you know, they're big kids. They can make their own decision. And then I said, okay, can I really afford to have my staff get sick? And knowing some of the health issues without getting into anybody's personal, I got some members of our staff, including yours truly, that we get the COVID thing, it's, you know, lights over, right? Because we're in that high risk group. So I said, you know, as a business decision, and we're busy sending out mass email blast to everybody saying the meeting tomorrow is canceled. We don't know when we're going to re-meet again, but don't come to the place tomorrow. And at 3 o'clock on Friday, we were posting signs on the door saying we're closed till future notice. If you need to get a hold of us, here's the website and here's the phone number. Well, lo and behold, the governor came to the same conclusion 4 days later, and we all saw what happened in Maryland, and of course we all saw what happened in Prince George's County. But the decision on our part to close had more to do with our core principles versus somebody telling us we should close our doors. And then subsequently, we have made the decision that we're not going to go back to large-scale meetings. We will have some smaller, more intimate, probably outside, but I'm not going to have 50 people going back and forth in front of Miss Barbara, breathing their germs on her. That's just not going to happen. And unfortunately, with some facilities, there's no way to marry up security with COVID and be able to come out with something that makes sense. So we announced to our group, not formally, but sort of informally, and have been, that we're not going to go back to any live meetings anytime soon. And interesting enough for me, we've been doing Zoom meetings and Zoom-like meetings probably now for about 2 or 3 months. And our folks have gotten used to it. And when I said a week ago and a couple of days ago that I don't see us going back to live meetings, every head in the Zoom is going, yeah, I'm okay with that. You know, I don't want to sit in traffic. And interesting enough, when we were doing certain live meetings, we do Deal Maker Workshop every Tuesday, we do a Thursday night call-in, and then we do typically a class or something. Typically, we would expect to have X number of people, and we would get a 60 to 70% attendance rate. We felt pretty good about it. We are seeing our numbers double and triple with our online meetings versus our live meetings. And to me, what that says is a couple of things. Number one, don't be fooled into thinking, okay, because your numbers are double or triple, it's going to continue on once people have a chance to go back. But as I scan our group, as I poll our group, as I talk to our group, they are saying, we like this online thing, at least for now, better, because we don't have to sit in traffic for 45 minutes to an hour to get to your physical location, walk in late, right? I just assume be at the comfort of my own home and my man cave, whatever, and still get the quality of information that you're delivering, as long as I can get the quality of information that you're delivering. And so that's had us really rethinking, okay, as we transition, because again, I believe we're not going back, but as we transition, do we need 2 5,000 square foot condo units, or is now a good time to get rid of one of them? Because in the future, we could probably do what we're doing in 5,000 square feet or possibly less. And we're having very serious conversations about that, and possibly dropping one of our condo units and just, focusing on the one. We're having very serious conversations, and not even just conversations. I'm spending very real dollars upgrading our website Not so much because we're going to host things on the website, but we're building up a whole lot of digital content through all these Zoom meetings. We're doing 2 and 3 Zoom meetings a week, and we're recording every one of them. And those Zoom meetings need to live somewhere, not necessarily behind the firewall in REIU, but maybe on the website. So there's people who didn't catch the live meeting when it really happened. Now maybe they can come to realinvestors.com and see it. And maybe they want to see a 2-hour meeting in 2 hours, or maybe they want to see it broken up into half-hour segments. So we're spending very real dollars hiring outsourced digital website talent and really looking at our website in ways that we weren't looking at it the same way even 6 months ago. So those are some of the things that we're doing. And then as far as the real estate, Ebere is absolutely correct. There has been absolutely positively no slowdown whatsoever in either the traditional real estate, I want to buy a home and live in it market, or the investor market. That market continues on. I still believe there's going to be an uptick in foreclosures at some point in time, but we're not seeing it show up yet. I still believe there will be some kind of a slowing of the real estate market, but we're not seeing it yet. In fact, it's so resilient, it scares me. And I'm actively representing a couple of different clients, both investor clients as well as my son and his girlfriend are looking for a house to live in, and I'm representing them, soon to not represent them because it's too much stress working with family. But the activity level has not declined because of the COVID virus. Not at all. If anything, it's probably kept the same pace. Or maybe this is just sort of a delayed spring, because we always see an uptick in the spring anyway, and maybe March was sort of deferred a little bit because of all the things going on. But there's no question that the real estate market is still very robust. Numbers are still holding firm. And at the end of the day, look, people still need a place to live, right? You made it, and now all of a sudden, you may even need more house to live, because now all of a sudden your house has become where you teach your kids, so it's now the classroom, and where you do your business. And maybe you actually need more space, not less space, in what you call your primary residence. So again, we're not seeing any change whatsoever in terms of that slowing down. It's probably picked up a little bit and probably right on par with where we were last year.
Thank you. Thank you for all the responses. So we're wrapping up here in 3 minutes. So one person said they're definitely updating their team and revising their marketing strategy. I think that would be very good. That's a wonderful transition. And then somebody said they're trying to restructure their loans. I think that's a good idea if you can get them restructured and put in the right team. So this is the second time we're hearing about team. Making and taking the time and advantage of free services, that's good. City incentive, business owner resources, that's wonderful, because it's not going to last for long. And then somebody else say, I need to look at a different commercial real estate agents to handle rental and another contractor for repairs. Yes, that's now is the time when you want to get new relationships. This is the time where if you didn't know how to cut off a relationship, you can blame it on COVID and move on.
There you
go.
You know? Everybody else says. Anybody seen the unemployment report last week?
I know.
There's a whole lot of people get laid off. They got nothing to do with COVID. Nothing.
Yep. And then somebody else working on refinancing properties. Yeah, I think this is the time to make the right financial decisions if you can. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and